Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, the story of Florida as only a native can stand to tell it. We talked to New York Times best-selling author Craig Pittman about love and loathing in the Sunshine State. Later in the program, new environmental impacts of used and damaged solar panels and how a new recycling company plans to get them to a safe place. But first, Craig Pittman's latest book about Florida is part love letter, part hate mail. It's in keeping with the style that has defined his decades of award-winning reporting on the state's environment, and infinite parade of characters. He joins us now via video. Craig Pittman, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So your latest book is Welcome to Florida, True Tales from America's Most Interesting State. And I'm going to say interesting sounds a bit like a euphemism in this case. What do you really think about Florida?
We call ourselves the Sunshine State, which is just a lie we tell the tourists, because really, most of our cities get more rain on an annual basis than famously rainy Seattle. But I think if we called ourselves the most interesting state, we could back that up. We're the only state where the list of government jobs includes mermaids and python hunters. We're the only state with the most freshwater springs in the world are here. We're the state that has the most fake dinosaurs, even though dinosaurs didn't really live here back when they were walking the earth because we were underwater at the time. I mean, there's just so many great, interesting things about Florida. I mention in the book, the book is supposed to be sort of a guidebook for the 900 new people who move here every day, and most of them have no idea what they've gotten themselves into. But it tells them about some of the important stuff you should know. I tell them about the citrus industry. I tell them about alligators, that alligators may save your life one day. And I mention, that we're also the state with the most nudist resorts. So I think that's kind of an important detail too.
You're a native, as I said. You were born in Pensacola, and
Yes.
your background in journalism, it goes back at least to college. I understand that you attended Troy State University in Alabama, and the dean,
Home of the fighting prophylactics. Yes.
the fighting, very nice. The dean at the time, though, labeled you, quote, the most destructive force on campus. So you were a bit of a muckraker even
I
back
don't
then.
I don't think I don't think he intended that as a compliment, but I took it that way. No, he was not happy that we on the college newspaper staff were not being more of a PR organ for the university. And instead, we were functioning like a newspaper would. We were running stories on drug busts in the dorms, and the fact that the state ethics commission was doing an investigation of the university president. He did not think we should be reporting any of that stuff, but we did. Our big coup, I think, was when we found out that the university president had denied a pay raise for all of the faculty members. We were the lowest paid. We had the lowest paid faculty in the state, and we found out that the university president was at the same time redecorating his office, and we
Wow.
got hold of all the receipts and ran that in the paper, and so people could say, holy cow, look at look at the hypocrisy here.
That's good stuff to be doing at the college level. Was there something formative about your upbringing or any experience that you had that kind of brought you into journalism and particularly like investigative journalism?
I think the big thing was when I was a kid, my parents would read the paper and would tell each other about the Hey Martha stories that they saw in the paper every day. Hey, it's sort of a, hey, look at this wild thing. And of course, being in Florida, there were lots of wild things going on in the paper. And I started reading it myself. I'd come home from school. There were back then Pensacola had an afternoon newspaper. So, and I was a latchkey kid before we knew what the term meant. And I would pick up the afternoon paper and bring it in and unroll it. And while I was eating my little afternoon snack, I'd start off with the funnies, but then work my way back to the news columns, and it was a real eye opener.
You have written, I think, at least 7 books, maybe more than that.
Yes,
And you've
just seven so far.
7 so far. Um, you are prolific though, and you've, spent 40 years as a reporter on this state. Has your view of Florida changed much in that time?
Um, I think some, yes. The hard thing to wrap your mind around, anytime we go to the ballot box, it's a different set of voters who are voting because, like I said, we get 900 new people moving in every day, and those folks are coming in with no knowledge of what this place was like, a year ago, much less 10 years ago. They don't know that we used to have a growth management act that actually would control where we grew and make sure that there was infrastructure in place to support the growth. They don't know the history. They don't know how important the Sunshine Law has been for Florida. And so when legislators or governors proposed cutting back on the amount that's available to the public, they're okay with that. And so I think we, as longtime people who are longtime residents, we need to do more to educate those new folks and tell them, hey, we're losing stuff that's important to the state. And it's been heartening to see the reaction that people have had to some of the biggest threats to our natural environment. I mean, when people found out that there was a proposal to build golf courses in Jonathan Dickinson State Park and do some other horrible things, they came out in force and protested all over the state and got the legislature's attention and got the legislature to pass a law saying you can't do that ever again. That was incredibly heartening, and I think that's a great thing for people to remember is we know that the environment is important in Florida. We know the environment is the economy in Florida, and people are willing to defend it. And I think both political parties need to be paying more attention to that.
If you're just joining us, we are talking to author Craig Pittman about his latest book and his years chronicling the story of Florida. Later, we're going to be talking to the creators of a new solar plant recycling facility about what's predicted to be a tsunami of solar waste. But if you have a question for Craig Pittman or a comment, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. And of course, you can watch our live stream right now on the WJCT YouTube channel. Speaking of pollution, you are doing a bit of a public service with this book, this most recent one, Welcome to Florida, because you're reminding people, as you said, about some of the history, the context for some of these
Mhm.
important stories and things that are happening today, precedents that were set years ago. One of the stories that you touch on in the book is the story of Jacksonville, which, of course, is something our listeners would care about. Um,
They should.
yeah, and the chapter is called Stink City. Tell us a little bit about that chapter and why you decided to
Yeah.
include it.
Well, we were moving my son up to Jacksonville. He's working there now. And my wife reminded me while we were driving in, she said, "Oh, remember how stinky this place used to be?" And I had forgotten, but she was absolutely right. It used to be Stinky Town right there. And you guys went through a long process of trying to get rid of that smell, which rich people said smelled like money. But of course, poor people, for most of the people who lived in Jacksonville, it smelled like, cancer and other problems. And so I got interested in finding out how that all came about because Florida has a continuing and growing problem with toxic algae blooms. And I said, how can we compare those two? How can we do the things Jacksonville did to get rid of a terrible pollution problem and use that for the toxic algae blooms? And it was a great way of looking at history, but also looking at what our current situation is.
It's also a reminder, of the fact that when things like that happen, there very often is a divided experience in terms of
Mhm.
who is enduring, the downside of some sort of development or some sort of production and who is benefiting from it. And that's something that kind of shows up in a lot of the stories that you tell.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and because and it's something I wanted to point out is, there were people who were profiting off of the really bad smells coming out of Jacksonville, but there were also it was causing problems for the city in terms of recruitment, getting new people to move in, getting new businesses to move in. Folks would come there and take one big whiff and say, "Nope, we're not gonna be here. We're gonna move to a different city because
Mhm.
this Jacksonville isn't it." And so, the folks who got to work to make that change, God bless them, because the city has clearly benefited from that.
So the environmental beat is a tough one. I mean, it can lead not only, for people who are active in the environmental community, but to people who are covering it to a little bit of burnout, especially when you see some of these issues emerge again and again. sometimes there is a temporary victory, but it kind of resurfaces years later. And I would imagine that's something in your, many years of reporting on these issues that you've encountered. How do you manage that? Do you experience burnout?
I think the way you manage that, or at least the way I manage it, is with lots of really corny jokes, bad puns, and obscure pop culture references. 'Cause that's that's the
That's your
that's
coping
sort of the
mechanism?
that's my coping mechanism. And occasionally my editor says, "Are you sure you want to put this in?" Yes, yes, definitely. I want to put this really bad joke in there because I think you have to make people laugh about stuff even while you're telling them, "Hey, things are looking really bad," because otherwise they're going to stop reading. So if you want them to be educated, then you have to give them something to sink their teeth into. And I do my best. I write this weekly column for the Florida Phoenix, and a lot of what's in this book are columns that ran in the Phoenix first. And I do my best to write a positive one, to say here's something positive that happened. And some of those columns are in the book. For instance, there's a column, the very first piece in there, and in some ways my favorite one, is the one about a developer who was the kind of a guy who would wear alligator shoes with alligator eyeballs on them. I mean, he's just
Oh,
that's
my.
so flamboyant. And he and a partner who actually had money from founding the Subway sandwich chain, they were planning to go into Yeehaw Junction, one of the quirkiest towns in Florida, and they were going to create this development that they were calling Destiny, that would wipe out a huge chunk of Florida grasshopper sparrow habitat. And things did not go well for them. They wound up suing each other. The cops got involved, and the land wound up being preserved, and the sparrow habitat is still around. And so, I wrote that up. I think the title for that one is "Destiny Takes a Hand." So there are some good outcomes, and we should celebrate them and enjoy them.
Absolutely. We've got a call from Eric in Arlington. Good morning, Eric. Go ahead.
Yeah, my father was a longtime professor at UNF, and UNF has tried to sort of erase his legacy because he leaned left. He was a professor of political science and sociology out there, had a PhD, and taught for quite a while out there. But anyway, he was part of something called the Sawmill Slough Club, I think was the name of it. This is going back 50 years, so it's hard for me to remember.
Yeah.
But they worked to prevent the building of a golf course out there somewhere by UNF or adjacent to UNF or on UNF grounds around there. And I was wondering if you knew the details of that, because I'm not really sure all the details myself. Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks, Eric. Craig, I don't know if you know, I mean, I'm kind of familiar with that. Is that a story that you are aware of? I mean, UNF, when it was built, was really, sold on and kind of predicated on the idea that it was a natural place and it was in the middle of a natural environment. And that was almost incorporated into the curriculum. It was kind of a big part of UNF's story. And of course, as it's grown, it has had to push into some, well, I don't know if it's had to, but it has pushed into some of those areas. And the golf course was one controversy.
I was not aware of that, but it sure sounds interesting. I'd love to read more about it. It sounds a lot like the story of Florida Gulf Coast University down in the Naples area, which got built because of the prodding of one very, very successful campaign donor, Ben. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank. It's Ben Hill Griffin the third,
Mm.
and they were talking about how great it would be for the environment, but of course the property they picked to build it on was a lot of wetlands, and it got to be known as Mildew U because the campus would flood so regularly. Uh, and of course, it was also Florida panther habitat as well. So, yeah, don't believe what the don't believe what the government's telling you about how great things are. I guess is the bottom line here.
You mentioned the new arrivals in Florida, maybe as many as 1,000 new people every day coming here,
Mhm.
as you say, without knowing anything about Florida history, Florida politics, even Florida's environment. I think a lot of people move here thinking it's one thing, and only after
Mhm.
living here for a while realize that that's sort of a manicured or artificial version of nature in Florida. One thing that you focus on in your book that is, I think, important for people to know, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about, is the Burt Harris Act. Can
Oh
you
yeah.
remind us of what that was, what it did, and how that sort of changed how development could occur in Florida?
Yes. The Burt Harris Act, which I think is maybe the most destructive law ever passed by the state legislature, uh, was supposed to focus on any change that a government agency makes to your property that makes it become more burdensome for development. And so if you feel like that the zoning that they have put on you is burdensome to your development, you can sue them. And that threat of suing, by usually by developers, not by the farmers or anybody like that, but developers, that threat of a lawsuit is usually enough to make local governments back down and say, okay, whatever you want, we'll give it to you. And so I sort of delved into the history of it, who Bert Harris was, who was really behind it, which was a guy who was making money off development. And often the lawsuits that do get filed do not end up as success the developers, but the threat of the lawsuit is enough usually to win the day for them. And so that's why I was saying, hey, Republican legislators, you should repeal this. Democrats passed it, so this would be a big triumph for you if you took this one away. So there you go.
We should say to our listeners, a little bit of glitching is happening on our end with you, Craig. And so if it gets worse, we'll give you a call and we'll dump out of the video. But
Okay,
we'll stick with it for now. But
this is the way I usually look.
you look great. You look great. It's more the sound. Um, the Burt Harris Act, though, was sort of ideally, or initially, the idea was that it was kind of built out of the concept of eminent domain, right? That if land is taken from you by the government, you have a right to be compensated somehow. And so this was sort of the development version of that, but it really grew beyond what we think of as a government taking.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, and there were laws on the books already to take care of the idea of the government taking your property, and nobody was challenging the success of those laws. The idea was, well, let's take it a little bit beyond and make it cover, zoning decisions and things like that. And that's where that's where it became this sort of menacing thing that developers could use to scare local governments into doing their bidding, which I think we're all seeing the results of that now. We're seeing that and the loss of the Growth Management Act. That people I was watching a Wakulla County Commission meeting the other day. Wakulla County, very rural county up in the Panhandle, home of the Sop Choppy Worm Grunting Festival, among other things. And I saw people complaining about that the rampant growth is out of control there, that the roads are crumbling, that the schools are jam-packed, and they were begging their county commissioners to start saying no to the developers. So people are seeing that if you don't control the growth, if you don't funnel it into the proper channels, or don't have the infrastructure ready by the time the development comes online, it's going to ruin your quality of life. I'm hopeful that they'll get back to where we were in 1985 when the legislature passed the Growth Management Act and followed it right up until 2011 when Rick Scott said, no, let's not do that anymore.
You said that you were watching a Wakulla County Commission meeting, which is, one of the things that the general public should thank you for, because that is the kind of thing that puts most people to sleep. And it is where a lot of important news comes from at those commission meetings. One thing that is not in your book, but that you did recently write about in a column for the Phoenix, was Senate Bill 180, which took effect.
Oh, God.
Um,
Yeah.
and is now law. What is the concern there? Tell us about Senate Bill 180.
All right, Senate Bill 180, which I think is appropriately named because it's a 180 from common sense. It was sold as a hurricane recovery bill. The idea was that this would make things better for trying to recover from the hurricanes, and actually it does the exact opposite. It does the 180 from that. That it binds the hands of local governments from doing things that would make things better. So let's say, for instance, your neighborhood got totally wiped out by the storm surge, and you want to build back in the exact same place. The local government can't stop you, even though you're basically signing a death warrant for whoever's going to live there. And the Senate Bill 180 says anything that the government tries to do that becomes burdensome to the property owner, then they can't do it. And the idea is property rights are more important than human life, which I think is crazy. But, the legislature passed it by an overwhelming margin because they thought it was a hurricane recovery bill. The governor signed it. Now you've got, I think we're up to 25 local governments that are suing, trying to overturn the bill. And the sponsor, Nick DeSegli, says, well, maybe we ought to look at revising that law. So, we're starting to get their attention, I guess, that
Yeah, yeah. I
they
know that
messed
it's
up.
something that's already impacting, our local governments that have had their comprehensive plan changes shot down. And to your point, it's not just, you couldn't rebuild your house in the exact same place, but if you were required to raise it by 3 feet or put it on stilts, that's also something that the government could no longer require you to do. Just a basic safety measure to make sure that you're not needing to make an insurance claim on the same thing 5 years down the line.
Yeah, and it's just crazy that let me give you a good example. Orange County went through, I think it was about 9 years of public meetings, of discussion, of uh, adjusting this Vision 2050 plan for their future growth. And when they finally implemented it earlier this year, the state said, no, you can't do that. You can't do any of that stuff because Senate Bill 180 says you can't. All this work that you put in, and by the way, the plan had been approved by a majority of the voters in Orange County, but the state was saying, no, sorry, Senate Bill 180 says you can't make any changes, even though you've spent 10 years working on it. So that's the level of interference, I guess is the right way to put it, of Tallahassee Bigfooting the local governments.
You talk about in your books about how Florida is singled out very often, and rightly so. But is Florida really unique in terms of being unusually corrupt, for instance, or is it just more closely examined? I mean, you think about places like Chicago or Providence or Miami or Vegas. Um,
Well, you just said Miami, so.
well, sure, but in terms of places that are thought of as being inherently different, do you think Florida really is different, or does it just get attention that sort of attaches to its reputation?
I don't know how we compare corruption wise to other states. Bear in mind that I am from Escambia County, where we put the word scam right in the name. So, so and we actually had a county commissioner who took a payoff where they put the money into a cook pot and gave it to him. So that's one
Wow.
of my favorites. But I mean, it, it's not. It's really blatant in some instances. I mean, think about it. I often remind people, Carl Hyacin doesn't make anything up. He just changes the names.
Carl Hyacin, Dave Barry, there is some overlap with the work that they do and the work that you've
Mhm.
done in terms of being a chronicler of Florida's absurdist history. And sometimes it's, illegal and environmental trespasses. What do you draw from them? Do you see similarities? What is your relationship to them in terms of being like one of those Florida writers?
Oh, Carl Hyacин's who I want to be when I grow up,
Uh-huh.
quite frankly. And the great thing is, there's so much of Florida that you can't make up stuff that if you tried to do a novel and put this stuff in, the editors would say, no, nobody's going to believe that. Florida's first state flag actually said "Let us alone," which it just blows my mind. The things like that, the I mentioned about the mermaids and the nudist resorts and so forth. It This is a really special place, and I always try and remind people there are some great things about this place. Florida has an award-winning state park system. We've won national awards 4 times, which is 3 more times than any other state has won. Our beaches are routinely ranked among the best in the world, and our cop log items are definitely the funniest. You know, one of my favorites is one from Gainesville. Man in road rage incident runs over self. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's a special headline. Um,
yes, definitely.
Florida,
The piece I wrote about alligators, by the way, starts with one of the classics, which was Florida man throws alligator through drive-through window.
yes,
Um,
yeah.
and he was charged with assault with a deadly weapon, where the weapon was the alligator.
I mean, we do sort of out onion the onion in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Florida has now spread a little bit, though. I mean, people say that we kind of lead the nation now, whether it's on legislative matters or just kind of planting the flag on political stylings, the tone of the discourse. So, a lot of people think that the world is sort of becoming more, not the world, the country is becoming more like Florida. Do you think that's the case?
I'm seeing a lot of trends that started here that are showing up elsewhere. Uh, Project 2025, which is apparently the map for how the government is now being run, got its start in Florida. A lot of the stuff that's going on here, wound up being translated into that. So, getting rid of vaccine mandates and um, ignoring climate change, even though there's lots of science for that. And instead, we passed a law focused on the dangers of chemtrails. Just crazy stuff like that is now showing up in in the things that Washington is doing. So, and of course, remember that our current president is a Florida man now.
Mm.
Um, I believe it was the New York Post that actually ran a headline that said Florida man runs for president when he announced he was going to run this last time.
Yeah, yeah. So we mentioned that you're in town Friday for a book reading. You're going to be at Happy Medium Book Cafe, and that's going to be a great event. I mean, it starts at 6 for kind of a social hour, but then you have a interview by Tim Gilmore, who's on this program with some frequency. He's a local author, very prolific local historian. So that should be a lot of fun. What should people expect?
Well, I'll tell some stories. I'll probably tell the Destiny story and some of the others from the book. And I'll be wearing a very colorful tropical shirt
Uh,
because that's what I do every day now. And I should mention that I think that although there's a ticket price for people, I think if you bring your emotional support alligator, the alligator does get in free as long as it's on a leash.
Excellent. Well, the book is called Welcome to Florida: True Tales from America's Most Interesting State. It is a great read. It's a fun read. It's an important read, I would argue as well. Craig Pittman, it's so nice to talk to you. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Up next, what happens to dead and damaged solar panels? We talk to a local company dealing with the massive growth of solar waste. Welcome back. Well, Florida has long been told that the future of energy is solar. But what happens when solar panels are broken, damaged, or just at the end of their useful life? The answer is actually more arbitrary than you might think. Here to tell us more is Nathan Arbitman. He's the Chief Commercial Officer for OnePlanet Solar Recycling. Nathan, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Ann. It's my pleasure.
So, a lot of people maybe don't think about the afterlife of solar panels. But in fact, it is a kind of a huge issue. There is what some people in this industry have described as a solar waste tsunami that is coming. Um, Tell us a little bit about what the problem is, and about the life of a solar panel.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, again, thanks for having me here. I'm excited to share more about my company and the problem that we're trying to solve, which you've just described. So yeah, I mean, solar energy is it's still one of the cheapest and fastest way to get new electrical capacity on the grid. But as you said, people don't really think about what happens at the end of the life of those solar panels. Solar panels can reach the end of their life in multiple ways. It can happen, yeah, maybe the roof that they were installed on it has reached the end of its life, and the panels need to come down. Maybe the solar asset owner says, "Oh, you know what? These panels are quite old. I'd just like to install some new panels in order to get more electricity out of my system and generate some more revenue for the from the asset." But at the end of their life, the solar panels need to be managed responsibly, and that's the problem that we're trying to solve.
So they need to be managed responsibly, but currently there are very few laws in place nationally and in this state governing the outcomes. Um, there have been some efforts at making rules on the federal level with the Environmental Protection Agency, some discussions at the state level with the Department of Environmental Protection. Right now, what is one required to do with a solar panel if they're taking it off their roof?
Yeah, that really depends on the state in which the solar asset is located. There's a real patchwork of regulations. And as you said, the majority of states don't actually require that solar panels be recycled. And so we find today about 50% of solar panels being recycled, and the other 50%, unfortunately, are going to landfills. And at OnePlanet Solar Recycling, we see that as a major missed opportunity, in addition to of course, the environmental impacts of that choice.
And so, what are the environmental impacts of that choice? What are the contents of a solar panel? What happens to the contents if they're not recycled?
So solar panels do contain some heavy metals. So depending on the technology that's used in the solar panels, they can contain metals like cadmium, tellurium, which, if not managed properly, could potentially leach into groundwater. There's also lead is contained in a number of older solar panels. At One Planet, we're primarily focused on reclaiming the valuable critical materials that are in those solar panels that reach the end of their life. And those are materials like silicon, copper, silver, aluminum, even the glass and some plastics. And so what we do is find a new life for those materials and put those materials back into various value chains across the country.
And so we think very often about rooftop solar. That's what we see primarily in our daily lives. But of course, as we're seeing on our video screen now, there are these large scale solar farms that are increasingly being built all around our state, all around the country. And so that is creating a much larger waste stream than just rooftop solar. What are the people who create those solar farms required to do in terms of making a plan for their eventual disposal?
Yeah, that's typically governed at the very local level. And so, you know, um, the um, they're often required by municipalities to have so-called decommissioning plans that explain exactly what they're required to do. Those requirements are going to vary from town to town, but increasingly we're seeing that those municipalities, the citizens who live in the town, they want to know what's going to happen to these solar panels in 20 to 30 years from now when this asset is retired.
And so, in places like Florida, where there are no regulations governing that, a local government could ask for a plan, like, "Hey, what's your plan?" But there is nothing that could allow them to mandate anything specific, or the state to mandate anything specific, other than sort of a handshake agreement. There's not any regulatory teeth.
That's true, although at the end of the day, it is oftentimes it's up to the municipality of whether to approve the permits. And so if the localities aren't satisfied with the plan, they don't need to approve the project, but we rarely see instances, especially in states without regulations like Florida, such projects being denied for that reason.
And the states that really do have some regulations on this. Before the program, you and I talked about Hawaii, but Washington State, North Carolina, New York, California, and so in a place like Florida that doesn't have a regulation, we're often told like this is how you should dispose of a battery, for instance, in a way that's responsible, not just throw it in the trash, which could go into the landfill. But right now, without those regulations, these panels really can go into a regular landfill, not a special hazardous waste landfill that's lined and designed to protect leaching into the environment. It really could go into just a regular dump.
It could potentially. I mean, I think technically the asset owner is responsible for determining whether this solar panel is considered hazardous waste or not, and they need to test it, et cetera, before disposing it. But in practice, you never know where it's going to end up. I mean, today it does cost a little bit more to recycle a solar panel than it does to landfill them. But what we're seeing with especially large asset owners, companies that are maybe in the public eye or that are owned by shareholders and that care about their brand and their reputation. More and more, they are making the responsible choice to recycle the panels.
So we mentioned that One Planet Solar has created this new facility in Green Cove. Talk to us a little bit about the process there, because there was a startup facility that began, I guess, last year, and now there's this big expansion planned, some $90 million. Where is the facility? What's it going to look like? How big is it going to be? When's it coming online? Tell us some of the details.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been operating for about a year and a half, a what we call a pilot facility in Green Cove Springs that can handle roughly 500,000 panels, 450,000 panels or so each year, which is a reasonable amount. But as you said, we're very excited about our expansion plans, and we're well underway with those plans. We've identified a site that we're not disclosing exactly where it is. We're still in discussions with the landlord there, but we're planning to take over a site and have that new site up and running in 2027. That site will be able to handle over 2 million solar panels per year. Initially, it will employ 75 people, and then in the next phase of expansion, we'll add another 50 people for 125 people total, 125 jobs. And yeah, we're very excited about helping to establish Florida as a leader in this emerging industry. I mean, and we chose this area for a very kind of strategic reason. And that is, there's a ton of there's I think 50 million. We estimate about 50 million solar panels in Florida alone that will be reaching the end of their life over the next 10 years. Florida, within in the Jacksonville area, we're within say 500 miles of three of the other four largest states, including Florida, that are where there's the largest installed base of solar panels nationwide. So, North Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia all have a lot of installed solar, and we think there's a tremendous potential for our facility and for Florida more broadly to lead in this area.
And Green Cove Springs in particular, I mean, obviously regionally, you can explain why you're making that choice. Is there a reason Green Cove was the ideal location?
I think it's really for the same reasons that I mentioned earlier, around the same reasons why we're planning to have the next facility be located in the greater Jacksonville area as well.
Yeah. And so this is, as you said, a $90 million expansion. Are there incentives? Is Green Cove, is the county, Clay County, offering anything to the company to make this happen?
We're in discussions with Clay County and other various stakeholders at the state level to see what might be available. There's nothing's firm yet. We did win a $14.5 million tax credit from the federal government, so that's an investment tax credit that will support the project.
Yeah. One of the things that we've talked about is the natural lifespan of a solar panel or a solar field, but storm damage is a big part of the story of solar panels, whether it is, hurricanes or hailstorms. Can you talk about how that presents for the industry? For people who don't know, how vulnerable are they? How much damage is caused when we have an Ian or an Irma go through?
Yeah, it's a good question. We actually see less damage than you might expect during hurricanes. I think that the industry talks a lot and is concerned a lot, much more about hail, which is a problem more in the kind of Midwest, Southwest of the country. And so, hail is a major issue, and that's something that has prevented a number of projects from being able to get insurance, for example,
Oh,
and the financing that they need. But yeah, fortunately, we don't see nearly as much damage as you might expect from hurricane damage.
there is, I would guess, though, just that there is a storm impact in Florida when we're talking about whole communities that are torn up or losing their roofs. I mean, there must be uh, some impact there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And when such events occur, we're hopeful that those panels will find their way to a responsible recycler.
Yeah. And so I've heard this described as a first of its kind facility. Is that in Florida, in this region?
Globally, as far as so we've invested a lot of our resources on developing a highly specialized technology that's designed to kind of disassemble the solar panels as quickly as possible, segregate the valuable materials into different streams, and package them for sale to different end users. So that that technology differentiation, that investment that we've made in technology, is something that we're very excited to get going.
Is that mostly a physical process where you're disassembling something and kind of putting the component parts in different buckets, so to speak? Or is it a chemical process where you're trying to extract something, be it a heavy metal or something else? Is there a waste stream produced?
That's a great question. We believe we've assessed all the different types of ways that you could recycle a solar panel, and we've concluded that a mechanical process is the way to go. And so there are no chemicals that are used in our process. There are others who do that. We don't think it's the right way to go, both in terms of the economics as well as in terms of the pollution that such approaches can create.
What do you anticipate with the regulatory landscape, and will regulations ultimately benefit you if the state or the federal government says these have to be disposed of in a certain way?
Yeah, I mentioned that patchwork earlier. I think what's interesting is if you when you look at the map of the different variations on the types of regulations at state level that uh, govern solar panel disposal, that map was a lot emptier 5 to 10 years ago, and I think it will be a lot fuller 5 to 10 years from now. And I think that's something that, as there are more rules that require solar panels to be handled responsibly, that's something that will not just benefit us, but could also potentially benefit the asset owners themselves by providing a bit more certainty in terms of the costs and implications of dealing with solar panels at the end of their life.
We know that there's been some pushback recently on clean energy initiatives. What are you forecasting for your own, the receiving end, if people are perhaps going to be getting fewer incentives to build solar?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think how we see that, Anne, is that, you know, given that our feedstock, the solar panels that are coming to our facility, by and large they're from solar projects that were installed 10, 12, 15, 20 years ago.
Mhm.
And, that market is what it is, and it's not affected by new regulations that or recent regulations that impact new solar capacity. So we're very bullish on the future.
Well, Nathan Arbitman from One Planet Solar, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much for coming and tell us about the project.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Up next, a Halloween nightmare comes to life on downtown streets.
Florida eye specialists and WJCT present Tired of Looking Tired? Eyelid Surgery, Indications, Insurance, and Outcomes with Dr. Irene Lee, an oculoplastic surgeon, at a free lunch and learn on Tuesday, November 4th. Registration at wjct.org/events.
World Affairs Council and UNF, opening doors to global understanding right here in Jacksonville. November 4th, Geopolitical Hotspots with Brett McGurk, a top national security advisor serving 4 U.S. presidents. More information at worldaffairscounciljax.org.
Vivi Warren is a woman ahead of her time. Her mother, however, is a product of the old order. Exploiting it has earned Mrs. Warren a fortune, but at what cost? Real-life mother duo Imelda Staunton and Bessie Carter star in George Bernard Shaw's classic Mrs. Warren's Profession. Filmed live at the West End, this new production explores the clash between morality and independence, traditions, and progress. Wednesday, November 5th. Popcorn and cash bar available. Doors open at 6:30 p.m. Film starts at 7. Go to wjct.org/film for tickets.
How did government shutdowns become such a regular part of American politics? They weren't normal for a long time, until 1980.
They did not see this as a particularly precedent-setting move. You don't see anybody saying, wow, this is going to totally change how the government works. It's almost more like accounting.
The history of government shutdowns, that's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
It's week 3 of the government shutdown. Services deemed non-essential are on hold. Some 750,000 federal workers remain furloughed, and the administration wants to permanently fire up to 10,000 government employees before it's over. What does all of this mean for you and your access to government services? That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, an upcoming street party promises scare zones, throwback fashions, and a night of Halloween-themed parties in and around the Elbow District. Here to tell us about it is the creator of Nightmare on Bay Street, Kenyana Holden. Welcome back.
Thank you.
We're also joined by the event's haunt director, Jaron Oxford. Hi, Jaron.
Hello, how are you guys today?
I'm great. So this is the 3rd annual Nightmare on Bay Street, Kenyana. How has the event changed and evolved since you started doing it? And congrats, first of all.
Thank you. Thank
on
you
year
so much.
3, yeah.
Yeah, we're excited. Change, I would say more intentional. Not that it's never not been intentional, but now we can look at it and say, okay, we are growing, in our nightlife district. So it's exciting to just be able to work with the venues a lot more and be able to do things that can hopefully cause for permanent change.
So for people who haven't been, what is the vision? What is the footprint?
So the vision for it is just honestly just to create that economic impact and bring more business to our small businesses that are downtown. So not just the clubs, but the restaurants, the bars. It's just to bring a lot of that there. Jaron also himself, he has Oxford Inc., so being able to bring more foot traffic in general, but also just nonstop. And don't just, come on festival days like this, come all the time. So hopefully we can get that. And I would say footprint wise, it's all, like you said, the Elbow. So everything that expands out. And then hopefully once we get to that point, it'll be the sports and entertainment district soon too.
And the area that's blocked off for this is basically 3 blocks of Bay Street, roughly. Is traffic open on those areas of Bay Street, or is it closed off? Is it like a block party?
It is a block party again. So it's exciting. So as everyone knows, we partnered with Placemaking Jacks, presented by iStar. So we are able to secure a grant for $10,000. I think I'm able to share that. Yeah. Yay, go us. And so with that, it helped us not only make it free, but also be able to expand it. So now we're pushing for creativity again. That's that the intentionality behind it. So pushing for connectivity and the walkability part of the festival. So the 200 and 300 block of Bay Street will be closed. 100 block, think of getting off of Main Street Bridge and making that right on Bay Street. It'll be opened up. It is still included, but we'll keep it opened up just so people can get in and out of the areas for like the Hyatt, or if they want to go around to go to where they live at, maybe at the Plaza at Berkman, they'll be able to still travel there.
That makes sense. So Kenyana's talking about this as if it's this like very nice, fun festival. Jaron, it's going to be terrifying, right? I mean, that's the deal.
Yeah, we plan to have a scare zone that is specially designed and themed after like a Woodstock theme. So we're going to have a lot of zombies, quite a bit of blood, a lot of people running around in the scare zone. This isn't like jump scares and mazes. It's free open reign as the customers get to come in and enjoy all the scenery and the music and the food. They will be tricked and treated with a bunch of zombies to scare them.
And you have some background in this. You created the haunt zones at Adventure Landing.
Well, I was their makeup artist. I also was one of their top actors. We had worked there for several years. We have a team. Shout out to my buddy Zach Bowker, who actually has taken over that team right now.
Ooh.
He helps facilitate a lot of things with us. So we've organized. We've been doing this for years with just keeping actors safe, keeping clients safe, trying to have the relation between event holder and customers, and bringing the vision of the characters to life, and keeping everybody safe.
What makes a good scare zone?
Oh man,
And
just
how do you come up with one?
really, it's just kind of like the area that you give me. We're gonna design the in and out, and then kind of the flow of traffic. And then what we do is we have an idea based off the theme, and we take characters, bring them to life with their costumes and the decor, and then mainly just finding things that really terrify people, interacting them. Sometimes it's entertainment more than terrifying. So sometimes, you get to laugh and joke. We have hecklers, we have people that just interact with everybody, so it makes it a good time in general.
And you have to, I guess, try to anticipate every possible reaction. People are not always something that you can predict their behavior. So how do you plan for perhaps an unwieldy response or, somebody that is really freaking out?
So what we do is we actually train all of our actors to know when to step down. Our job is to intimidate and to scare people, but most of my actors are all trained from working at places like Adventure Landing or 13th Floor, and then other haunted houses across the country. So what they'll do is they know better. Some of us have been assaulted in our haunted houses that we've been at, so it's not strange for that to happen. That was something I explained, and you were asking about change over the years. So Miss Yana has had actors doing these things for the past few years. Every year you can kind of see, I know she's got feedback that sometimes people will say stuff to our actors about, hey, don't touch me or this and that, or don't be near me, which we don't touch people, to make that very clear. We just get very close.
Yeah.
Okay. But sometimes the customers, they will feel intimidated, or they'll say, hey, don't get near me, and that's when we teach our actors to, hey, step back, it's for your safety, don't mess with them.
Yeah.
And then we have safety people, like we have safety precautions. Yana's great with making sure that we have police on staff and stuff like that for extra security. But I have a team of people that are in ear walkie-talkies, and they're listening, and we have code words, so that way we can address that.
Well, it is Peace, Love, and Nightmares. It is Friday, October 24th. It starts at 6. It's free, but there are VIP tickets available. There's all kinds of participating clubs. You can find a link on our website for more information. Kenyana Holden, Jaron Oxford, thanks so much for being here today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Hope to see you guys there.
All right, and that's our program. Thanks for listening. Join us tomorrow. We're going to be talking to the reporter and the former federal prosecutor behind a story of historic corruption inside the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
On October 29th at 9 p.m., join us for Public Radio Music Day 2025.